Let's turn our attention to more on what's going on with Ukraine. Let's talk to Steve Gill. He's a former advisor to both the Clinton and Bush administrations and joins us. Very good morning to you, Steve.
Hey, Julia, good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Right. So this meeting, Alaska is the place for this big summit between your president and Vladimir Putin. A very long journey, 8 or 9 hours for both men to fly from their respective capitals. What is the expectation of what will actually come out of this summit? Because we've got a sort of the programme for the talks now, and it's going to be a one-on-one meeting with translators. Sensitive matters will be discussed. The central topic will be the regulation of the Ukraine crisis, but they'll also discuss trade and economic cooperation. And then there will be a news conference at the end of the summit. They'll also have a wider meeting with delegations and a working breakfast. But as you know, the big concern in Europe, and particularly in Ukraine, is that they're going to basically sort of carve up Ukraine between the Russians and Ukrainians. What are your hopes?
You know, I'm interested that they're meeting at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. When I was a little kid, we actually lived there. My dad was a career Air Force fighter pilot. So I've actually lived at Elmendorf many years ago. Yeah, I think that this is good that you have these two leaders talking directly, not indirectly, not through third parties. I think there's no guarantee that when you're talking, you reach a negotiated resolution. But if you're not talking, you certainly aren't. And there's been too many years of them not talking, not getting the true facts from each other. And I think that's a step in the right direction. I am not hopeful that there's going to be any big grand resolution. I think that there's going to be a lot of discussion about Ukraine, Russia, but I think that a lot of the topics are going to involve the relationship diplomatically, business-wise between the U.S. and Russia. Yeah. You know, we have had, you were talking earlier about China, we have had the, unprepared resolution of pushing Russia closer to China. And now we're doing the same thing with India and others because of our policies. And I think trying to pull Russia back from China, who is our real military, political, and economic enemy, would be a byproduct that would be a good thing out of this discussion if it's possible.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? That Ukraine isn't the only country in the world, and Russia isn't the only menacing state in the world, and certainly America will have slightly different priorities from European nations, which is why I think, quite rightly, Donald Trump has always been right to say Europe should, be able to fund and militarily provide the protection for its own continent, rather than expecting American taxpayers to pay for it. And I completely agree with him. That always thought he was right on that. And obviously, America's concern is about China. And there is this urge to sort of try and pull Russia away from the clutches of China. Of course, all the economic sanctions following the invasion of Ukraine mean that Russia has been selling more of its oil and gas to China, cut price, and indeed to India. And to India as well. And of course, we're buying it from India, pretending we haven't got the economic sanctions, fueling, of course, the war machine in Ukraine. But isn't there an issue also that it's not just that, say, Ukrainian/European interests don't necessarily ally with so closely with American interests in this in terms of global concerns, but also that Donald Trump's personal interest. He wants the glory of I'm the president that ends wars, doesn't start wars. He wants, Nobel Peace Prize. He wants, mind you, he deserved it more than Obama did. He got one after being nominated within weeks of coming into power and having done not a single thing, which is ridiculous, frankly. But he also believes that every man has his price, because he knows he's got his price, and that he can offer these rare earth minerals or offer a deal, an economic deal or whatever, that will keep Putin happy. Whereas actually, what motivates Putin, he's already the richest man in the world with his secret bank accounts and things. What really motivates him is his nationalistic, expansionist policy for Russia. So is there a problem that Donald Trump and indeed his envoy Steve Witkoff, when he's had meetings with Putin, they don't really understand where Putin is coming from, and yet they're the men doing the negotiating?
I think that one of the bigger problems here is that, whatever resources Putin has been able to amass, how much has Zelensky amassed? I mean, even he's acknowledging he can't account for $200 billion that's been sent. There's been no accountability. Weapons and munitions that were supposedly sent to Ukraine are turning up in other places.
And we had the same in Iraq and the same in Afghanistan and the same in every single war. It's a corrupt part of the world. All former Soviet states are riddled with corruption. Wars always lead to that level of corruption. You know that, I know that. But are we really thinking right now Zelensky is carrying on the war for his own personal financial gain?
He's certainly not carrying it on to benefit the people of Ukraine who've been dying. You've got Poles in Ukraine of people. They want the war to end. Millions of military-aged men have fled Ukraine rather than fight for their own country.
And that's it. And the same in Russia, and that is, and that happened, and that happened in America in the Vietnam War as well, and other wars.
Wait. Now, during the Vietnam War, we weren't fighting for our own land. We were fighting halfway across the world. Yeah. There was no interest in us being there, so I can understand why people didn't want to go fight there. Ukrainians will not fight for their own territory.
Sorry, Ukrainians are literally fighting for their own territory right now. And again, you say those polls. I've seen other polls saying very different. People want peace. The question is,
ask
peace
all the Ukrainians
at what price?
in London, Julia. Ask all the Ukrainian men in London why they aren't back fighting in their homeland, why they're hiding in Poland and Ukraine and everywhere but Ukraine. They are not willing to fight for their country. That's why you're seeing men dragged off the streets.
Some people aren't willing. Even if Britain was invaded, America, there'll be some people who wouldn't be willing to fight for their countries. Yes, we know that. That is the same. I don't understand what point you're making. You're saying that Zelensky is not acting in the interest of Ukrainian people. Well, all the polls have shown that actually, if there were an election, he would still be the most popular figure for Ukrainians. I mean,
then hold an election. First of all, he is absolutely lying when he is saying you cannot, under their constitution, cede property. That's not true. The Constitution of Ukraine allows you to cede property with a referendum. He left that part out because he doesn't want to allow the people to vote.
Steve, genuinely, this is like talking to someone who's a conspiracy theorist on the internet.
I've read the Constitution.
So, no. He's like, yes, they're not allowed to cede territory. The Ukrainian state, the president of the parliament cannot cede territory without a national referendum. Equivalent to like yes. And likewise, presidents elected in a national election. Not unusually, in wartime, when a country has been invaded and large parts of that country, 20% of it indeed, are not able to hold elections, and millions of men are away from their homes, and millions of others, women and children, are abroad, they are not holding elections. Exactly the same way that Britain didn't hold an election during the Second World War either, because we were facing war, and most other countries didn't hold elections during war. That is the norm. Not holding a referendum right now and ceding territory is not an unusual thing. What he's pointing out is, without a referendum, he cannot cede the territory other than de facto.
Let me just point out that
that's not the killer point you think it is, Steve.
Maybe Americans are just tougher. We held 2 presidential elections during the U.S. Civil War. So I'm not going to take this, they can't hold an election because they're in the middle of a war. We held 2 during the Civil War.
Yeah. I mean, 200 years ago. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break, Steve.
1860.
Yeah. Pretty much 200 years ago, exactly. No, I'm sorry, Steve. Those are not the killer points. Those are not the killer points. Genuinely, do you think that if America were invaded, you're very lucky. You're a massive, cross-continent state. You've got 2 oceans. You're pretty much impossible to invade. You're very lucky. But if you think your country was invaded by Russia or anyone else, would you be willing to just go, yeah, we fought for 3 years, we've lost a load of people, maimed, our civilians bombed. Yeah, we'll just have a little meeting and we'll give up some territory, because I don't think a single American would sign up to that.
Well, I think that why we don't get invaded is not because of these big, beautiful oceans. We've been invaded by illegal immigrants that are trying to do something about that.
Stay on topic, Steve.
England is unarmed. We are armed. I think we would be fighting in the streets against any invasion. That's the other reason nobody invades us. The bottom line is that the Ukrainians are defending an area that identifies, speaks, and is Russian. They have lost that territory, despite the claim that Russia
there are lots of
has not
Russian
made any
speakers.
invasion.
Zelensky was brought up as a Russian speaker. It was a Russian satellite state. That's the norm.
Yes.
Oh God, I've had East European nannies who grew up speaking Russian. They were required to speak Russian. They didn't have a sodding choice about it.
They grew up Russian in eastern Ukraine.
They're Ukrainian. They're Ukrainian. Look, you've got Texans who want Texas to be an independent state and everything. It doesn't mean they're not American.
Well, that's not the same thing.
No,
as
well,
when
it
you've
is
got
the same
people
thing.
in the eastern Ukraine who've been bombed, attacked, and murdered by Kiev for a decade, and not surprisingly, they would rather be part of Russia, where they identify.
There's been a referendum, a completely fake referendum being held. Genuinely, Steve,
were you there, Julia? Julia, were you there for the referendum?
Were you there?
Yes, I was. Yes, Julia, I was there in Luhansk, Mariupol, and Donetsk. I witnessed the voting there when they sent their representatives to Moscow. I was there on the ground seeing it, and there wasn't anybody from Western media. There wasn't anybody from Talk. There wasn't anybody from CNN, Washington Post. They were in Crimea
it wasn't
when that referendum was held
a legitimate referendum because you can't hold a referendum if you're not the national country government. But there we are. Right, I'm going to give up on this, Steve. Look, are you finally? You're not hopeful any deal is going to come about. What deal do you think the Ukrainians should agree to?
I think they should agree to what they had agreed to before this started 3 years ago, before the Western powers forced them to go into conflict rather than have a resolution.
Steve, I'm giving up, Steve, genuinely. A former advisor to Clinton and Bush administrations. God help us. Philip Ingram, come on, you come back, come on.
Well, comparing the US Constitution to the Ukrainian Constitution, they're two different countries. They've got two different constitutions, so there's no comparison there. The Ukrainians are fighting for national survival. Yes, some Ukrainians left the country, but there are Ukrainians dying on a daily basis in very large numbers to try and protect their country. Vladimir Putin is trying to steal their country, and he will not stop there. I don't know where Steve is coming from with all of this. Corruption and war.
These are Kremlin talking points on social media.
They're all Kremlin talking points. And corruption and war. Zelensky came in an anti-corruption as an anti-corruption advocate,
yep.
and has been pushing anti-corruption. There was huge corruption in Ukraine beforehand. There's a lot less corruption now, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I don't even know or care whether Zelensky's whiter than white. I mean, genuinely.
And in the United States, you're trying to say that a percentage of the population speaks Russian, therefore they must be Russian. Well, what about the people who speak Spanish in the United States? Maybe we'll cede all of that to Mexico because they speak Spanish.
It's genuinely...
What planet, Steve?
It's literally nonsense. Thank you very much indeed for that.